The dying sunlight cast long shadows across the arid landscape as Nora Gilmore clutched her shawl tightly around her shoulders. The stagecoach had departed 2 hours ago, leaving her alone with her wagon on the desolate trail to Carlin, Nevada. She had insisted on traveling separately, her possessions too numerous to fit on the crowded coach, and now she was paying the price for her stubbornness. The year was 1876, and the West was still wild enough to make a woman traveling alone an object of concern. Nora had dismissed those concerns, confident in her ability to navigate the final 20 miles to Carlin where her aunt awaited. But as dusk settled over the rocky terrain and the temperature began to drop, doubt crept into her mind. She flicked the reins, urging the tired horses forward. "Just a few more miles," she whispered, more to herself than the animals. The wagon lurched forward, and then came the sound, a sharp crack that echoed across the empty landscape. The wagon tilted precariously, and Nora gripped the seat to keep from falling. "Whoa!" She pulled back on the reins, bringing the horses to a stop. Climbing down carefully, she assessed the damage. The right wheel had broken clean through, the wooden spokes splintered beyond repair. Nora's heart sank. Night was falling fast, and she was stranded miles from civilization. She glanced up at the darkening sky, calculating her options. She could unhitch one of the horses and ride to town, but that would mean abandoning her possessions. The thought of leaving behind her mother's china and her father's books, all she had left of them, was unthinkable. The sound of hoofbeats interrupted her thoughts. Nora spun around, reaching instinctively for the small Derringer pistol hidden in her pocket. A lone rider approached from the west, his silhouette growing larger against the pink and orange horizon. As he drew closer, Nora could make out a broad-shouldered man atop a chestnut stallion. His face was partially obscured by the shadow of his hat, but she could tell he was studying her predicament. He slowed his horse to a stop several feet away. "Even in, madam," he called, his voice deep and measured. "Seems you've had some trouble." Nora straightened her spine, trying to appear confident despite her circumstances. "Just a broken wheel. I'll manage." The stranger dismounted with fluid grace, tying his horse to a nearby scrub before approaching the wagon. He knelt beside the broken wheel, running his hand over the splintered wood. "This won't be a quick fix. Night's coming on fast." "I'm aware of the time, sir," Nora replied, her voice sharper than intended. He stood, removing his hat to reveal a face weathered by sun and wind, yet handsome in a rugged way. His eyes were a striking blue against his tanned skin, and when he smiled, small lines appeared at their corners. "Name's Griffin Edwards," he said, replacing his hat. "Most folks call me Griff. I've got a ranch about 5 miles east of here. I can help you get to safety before full dark." Nora hesitated. She'd been raised to be wary of strangers, especially in this untamed territory. But something about his straightforward manner put her at ease. "Nora Gilmore," she offered in return. "I'm heading to Carlin to live with my aunt." Griffin nodded, assessing the wagon. "Can't leave your belongings out here overnight. There's a storm brewing." He gestured toward the horizon where dark clouds were gathering. "We'll need to unhitch the horses, take what we can carry, and I'll come back for the rest tomorrow." Before Nora could argue, the first fat drops of rain began to fall. Griffin moved with efficient purpose, releasing the horses from their harnesses while Nora gathered her most precious items, her father's pocket watch, her mother's silver hairbrush, and a small box of letters. "The wheel's beyond repair," Griffin said, helping her secure her belongings. "We'll need a new one from the wheelwright in town." As the rain intensified, Griffin approached Nora's side of the wagon. Without warning, he placed his hands on her waist and lifted her down. The sudden proximity made Nora's heart race unexpectedly. "You're not alone," he said, his eyes meeting hers with unexpected gentleness. "I'll see you safely to shelter." Something in those simple words broke through Nora's carefully constructed composure. The stress of the journey, the fear of being stranded, and the relief of finding help overwhelmed her. She blinked rapidly, fighting back tears. "Thank you," she managed, her voice barely audible over the increasing rainfall. Griffin helped her mount one of her wagon horses, then swung up onto his own stallion. "Stay close," he instructed, leading the way across the darkening landscape. The rain fell in earnest now, soaking through Nora's woolen dress and chilling her to the bone. She followed Griffin's broad back, trusting this stranger to guide her through the growing darkness. Lightning flashed in the distance, illuminating the rugged terrain. After what seemed like hours, but was likely no more than 40 minutes, the silhouette of a ranch house appeared through the rain. A warm glow emanated from the windows, promising safety and comfort. They rode into a small stable attached to the main house. Griffin dismounted quickly, helping Nora down from her horse. She stumbled slightly, stiff from the cold and the ride, and he caught her arm to steady her. "Easy now," he said, his voice low. "Let's get you inside and warmed up." The ranch house was modest but well-maintained. A large fireplace dominated the main room, and Griffin quickly set about building up the fire. Nora stood dripping on the wooden floor, suddenly aware of her appearance, hair plastered to her face, dress clinging to her form. "There are some dry clothes in that chest," Griffin said, nodding toward a wooden trunk near the fireplace. "My sister stays here sometimes. You're about her size." "I'll wait outside while you change." Before Nora could respond, Griffin stepped outside, closing the door behind him. Left alone, Nora opened the trunk to find several simple but well-made dresses. She selected a blue cotton gown and changed quickly, grateful for the dry fabric against her skin. When Griffin returned, he carried 2 steaming mugs. "Coffee," he explained, handing one to her, "with a touch of whiskey to warm you up." Nora accepted the mug, wrapping her cold fingers around its warmth. She hadn't had alcohol since her father's funeral 2 months ago, but tonight seemed an exception worth making. The liquid burned pleasantly down her throat, spreading warmth through her chest. "Thank you for your hospitality, Mr. Edwards," she said formally, trying to regain some sense of propriety in this unusual situation. "Griff," he corrected with a small smile. "Mr. Edwards was my father." "Griff," she repeated, finding the name suited him. "I've imposed on you terribly. I should be in Carlin by now, meeting my Aunt Martha." "Your aunt will understand when she hears about the wheel," Griff replied, stoking the fire. "First thing tomorrow, I'll ride into town and let her know you're safe. Then I'll arrange for your wagon to be retrieved and repaired." "I should go with you," Nora insisted. Griff shook his head. "The trails will be mud after this rain. Better for you to rest here where it's dry. I'll bring your aunt back with me if she wishes." His logic was sound, but the thought of spending a night alone in a strange man's house was concerning. As if reading her thoughts, Griff added, "I'll sleep in the stable. The house is yours tonight." Nora felt a flush of embarrassment. "I couldn't put you out of your own home." "It's no trouble," he assured her. "I often sleep out there when I'm working late with the horses." The simplicity of his offer and the lack of ulterior motive in his eyes convinced Nora. She nodded her agreement, too exhausted to argue further. "Are you hungry?" he asked, moving toward a small kitchen area. Nora realized she hadn't eaten since noon. "Yes, but please don't trouble yourself." Ignoring her protest, Griff pulled a pot from the stove. "Venison stew, made it this morning." He ladled a generous portion into a bowl and placed it before her with a chunk of dark bread. The stew was surprisingly good, rich, and flavorful. Nora ate with more enthusiasm than was probably ladylike, but Griff didn't seem to notice or care. He sat across from her, drinking his coffee and occasionally adding a log to the fire. "How long have you lived here?" Nora asked, breaking the comfortable silence. 5 years, Griff replied. "Came out from Pennsylvania after the war, wanted open space and quiet. You fought in the war?" Nora asked, noting that he would have been quite young during the conflict. "Last 2 years," he confirmed. "Joined up when I was 17, saw enough to know I wanted something different after." Nora nodded, understanding. Her own father had returned from the war a changed man, his health broken by what he had endured. "My father was with the 4th Ohio Infantry." "Good men," Griff said simply. "What brings you to Carlin? It's not exactly a destination for young ladies." "My parents are gone," Nora explained, her voice steady despite the still fresh grief. "Father last winter, mother this spring. Aunt Martha is my only remaining family. She owns the millinery shop in Carlin." "I know the place," Griff nodded. "Good business, town's growing with the railroad." "That's what she wrote. She offered me a home and work in her shop." Nora stared into her empty bowl. "I sold everything in Ohio except what would fit in that wagon." The rain continued to pound against the roof, but inside the fire crackled warmly. Despite the strangeness of her situation, Nora felt safer than she had in months. "You should rest," Griff said, taking her empty bowl. "Tomorrow will be a busy day." He showed her to a small bedroom off the main room. It was simply furnished but clean, with a narrow bed covered in patchwork quilts. "Sleep well, Miss Gilmore." "Nora," she corrected with a small smile. "Miss Gilmore was my mother." Griff's eyes crinkled at the corners as he returned her smile. "Good night, Nora. You're safe here." After he left, Nora sat on the edge of the bed, trying to make sense of the day's events. She had left Ohio seeking a new beginning, but never imagined her journey would include being rescued by a blue-eyed rancher on a rainy night. Eventually, exhaustion overcame her contemplation, and she fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. Morning arrived with clear skies and birdsong. Nora woke disoriented, momentarily forgetting where she was. The events of the previous evening came rushing back, and she rose quickly, smoothing the borrowed dress as best she could. She found the main room empty, a note on the table informing her that Griff had ridden to town and would return by midday. Coffee sat warming on the stove, and fresh biscuits were wrapped in a cloth nearby. Nora was touched by his thoughtfulness. After eating, she explored the modest ranch house. It was neat but Spartan, clearly the home of someone who valued function over comfort. A few books sat on a shelf, mostly practical manuals on ranching and animal husbandry, but also, surprisingly, a volume of Tennyson's poetry. Outside, the ranch revealed itself in the morning light. A small herd of cattle grazed in a distant pasture, and several horses occupied the corral near the stable. A vegetable garden stood beside the house, well tended despite its utilitarian nature. Nora was examining the garden when the sound of hoofbeats announced Griff's return. He wasn't alone. A wagon followed behind his horse, driven by an older man Nora didn't recognize. Behind them came a smaller buggy with 2 women. "Nora," the older of the 2 women called out, waving enthusiastically. Aunt Martha was exactly as Nora remembered from childhood visits, plump, gray-haired, and perpetually smiling. The younger woman beside her was unfamiliar. Martha descended from the buggy with surprising agility for her age and enveloped Nora in a tight embrace. "My dear girl. When Mr. Edwards rode in this morning with news of your predicament, I was beside myself with worry." "I'm perfectly fine, Aunt Martha," Nora assured her, returning the embrace. "Mr. Edwards was very kind." "Griffin Edwards has always been a gentleman," Martha said, giving Griff an appreciative nod as he approached. "Now, let me introduce Nancy Parker. She works with me at the shop." The younger woman, perhaps a few years older than Nora, smiled pleasantly. "Pleased to meet you, Miss Gilmore. Your aunt has spoken of nothing else but your arrival for weeks." Griff gestured to the older man who had driven the wagon. "This is Elijah Turner, the wheelwright. He's agreed to repair your wagon." "Nasty break from what Mr. Edwards described," Elijah said, removing his hat. "We'll head out to retrieve your wagon now. Should have it fixed by tomorrow." "Thank you," Nora said sincerely. "I'm very grateful." "We've brought some of your things," Martha added. "Mr. Edwards was kind enough to describe what was left in the wagon. We packed what seemed most important." "You're welcome to stay another night," Griff offered. "The wagon won't be ready until tomorrow at the earliest." Before Nora could respond, Martha interjected. "Nonsense! The girl will come with us to town. She's already imposed on you enough, Mr. Edwards." "It was no imposition," Griff replied, his eyes meeting Nora's briefly. "Even so," Martha continued, "a young woman staying alone with a bachelor, regardless of the circumstances. Well, people talk. Better she comes with me now." Nora felt an unexpected reluctance at the thought of leaving. "I should change first," she said, gesturing to the borrowed dress. "And I'll need to gather my things." "Of course, dear," Martha agreed. "Nancy and I will wait here." Inside, Nora changed back into her own dress, which Griff had thoughtfully hung near the fire to dry overnight. As she folded the borrowed blue dress, she heard the door open. Griff stood there, looking somewhat awkward. "I wanted to give you this," he said, holding out a small package wrapped in brown paper, "for your journey to town." Nora accepted it curiously, unwrapping the paper to reveal a small leather-bound book, a collection of Robert Burns' poetry. "This is lovely, but I couldn't possibly, please," Griff interrupted. "I've enjoyed it many times. Perhaps you will too." The gesture touched Nora deeply. "Thank you. Not just for the book, but for everything." "It was nothing any decent man wouldn't have done," Griff said, his eyes dropping to the floor. "It was everything to me," Nora replied softly. A moment of silence passed between them, filled with unspoken thoughts. Finally, Griff spoke. "I hope you'll find happiness in Carlin, Nora." "Will I see you again?" The question escaped before Nora could consider its propriety. A slow smile spread across Griff's face. "I come into town every Saturday for supplies. Perhaps I'll stop by the millinery shop." Nora returned his smile. "I'd like that." The ride to Carlin was filled with Martha's animated chatter about the town, the shop, and the various people Nora would soon meet. Nancy occasionally added comments, mostly practical information about their work and living arrangements. Carlin itself was larger than Nora had expected, a proper town with a main street lined with businesses, including the Central Pacific Railroad station that had put the settlement on the map. Horses and wagons moved up and down the street, and pedestrians bustled about their business. Martha's home was a two-story building on a side street, with the millinery shop occupying the ground floor and living quarters above. It was neat and comfortable, if somewhat crowded with Martha's collection of knickknacks and mementos. "Nancy has the room across the hall," Martha explained, showing Nora to a small but pleasant bedroom. "The bathroom is at the end of the corridor. We're fortunate to have indoor plumbing, thanks to Mr. Parker's investments in the town's infrastructure." "Your father?" Nora asked Nancy, who had followed them upstairs. Nancy nodded. "He owns the bank. He's quite progressive about town improvements." "You'll meet everyone tomorrow," Martha assured Nora. "Sunday services are the social event of the week. For now, rest and settle in. Your things will arrive tomorrow when Mr. Edwards and Mr. Turner return with your wagon." Left alone, Nora sat on the edge of the bed, feeling strangely displaced. This was to be her home now, yet her thoughts kept drifting back to a small ranch house and the man who had said, "You're not alone." She opened the poetry book Griff had given her, finding an inscription on the inside cover that she hadn't noticed before. To find beauty in unexpected places is the gift of an open heart. G.E. Nora ran her fingers over the words, wondering what other depths lay behind Griffin Edwards' quiet exterior. The next day, as promised, Griff arrived with Elijah Turner and Nora's repaired wagon. They had carefully packed all her possessions, nothing missing or damaged. Martha invited them in for coffee, an invitation Griff accepted with a polite nod. In the small sitting room behind the shop, Nora found herself stealing glances at Griff as he conversed with Martha about the recent weather and cattle prices. He looked different in town clothes, less rugged but no less handsome. When it came time for him to leave, Nora walked him to the door. "Thank you again for all your help," she said formally, aware of Martha's presence just inside. "It was my pleasure," Griff replied with equal formality. Then, lowering his voice, he added, "Have you had a chance to read any Burns yet?" "A little," Nora admitted. "He has a unique perspective on love and nature." "That he does," Griff agreed. "I particularly enjoy his thoughts on unexpected connections between people." Before Nora could respond, Martha called from inside, asking about dinner preparations. With a tip of his hat and a promise to see her Saturday, Griff departed. The following days were a whirlwind of introductions and new routines. Martha's shop was popular among the ladies of Carlin and surrounding ranches, keeping them busy from morning until evening. Nora discovered she had a talent for arranging displays and selecting trimmings that complemented a customer's features. Nancy proved to be an amiable companion, teaching Nora the business with patience and good humor. In quiet moments, she shared gossip about the town's inhabitants, including tidbits about Griffin Edwards. "He came here about 5 years ago," Nancy explained as they worked on a wedding bonnet. "Bought that small ranch from old Mr. Hollister and has built it up steadily. Keeps to himself mostly, but he's well respected. Honest in business and generous when someone's in need." "Has he never married?" Nora asked, trying to sound merely curious. Nancy smiled knowingly. "No, though not for lack of interested parties. Sarah Wilson at the boarding house has set her cap for him for years, but he's never shown particular interest in courting anyone." Saturday arrived with clear skies and mild temperatures. Nora found herself paying extra attention to her appearance, selecting a dove gray dress that Martha had complimented as particularly flattering. She told herself it was merely proper to look presentable when meeting customers, but the flutter in her stomach when the shop bell rang suggested otherwise. Griff entered carrying a small crate of apples. "From my trees," he explained, setting them on the counter. "First harvest of the season." "How thoughtful," Martha exclaimed, examining the fruit. "These will make a wonderful pie." Nora stepped forward. "Good morning, Mr. Edwards. Miss Gilmore," he replied with a slight bow. "I trust you're settling in well." "Very well, thank you." The formality between them felt strange after the intimacy of their first meeting, but necessary under Martha's watchful eye. Martha, however, was not one to stand on ceremony. "Mr. Edwards, will you join us for Sunday dinner tomorrow? Nancy's father will be there, and the Reverend Johnston." "It would be lovely to have another gentleman at the table." Griff hesitated, glancing at Nora. "I wouldn't want to impose." "Nonsense," Martha insisted. "Consider it thanks for helping my niece. Nora makes an excellent apple pie, don't you, dear? She can use these very apples." "In that case, how could I refuse?" Griff said, his eyes crinkling with suppressed amusement. After he left to complete his other errands, Martha nudged Nora playfully. "He's quite handsome, isn't he?" And those blue eyes. No wonder half the unmarried women in town find reasons to ride past his ranch. Aunt Martha, Nora protested, feeling her cheeks warm. Mr. Edwards was simply being neighborly. Of course, dear, Martha agreed, not sounding convinced. Now about that pie. Sunday dinner was a formal affair in Martha's household. The dining room table was set with her best china, and the meal itself was substantial roast chicken, potatoes, fresh vegetables, and Nora's apple pie for dessert. Mr. Parker proved to be a serious, business-minded man who dominated the conversation with discussions of railroad expansion and mining prospects. Reverend Johnston was his opposite, jovial and fond of humorous anecdotes about parish life. Griff sat across from Nora, participating in the conversation when addressed, but otherwise content to observe. Occasionally, their eyes would meet, and Nora would feel that same flutter she'd experienced in the shop. After dinner, while Martha and Nancy cleared the dishes, refusing all offers of help from Nora, Mr. Parker engaged Griff in a discussion about cattle prices. Reverend Johnston, sensing Nora's exclusion from the conversation, drew her aside. "Your aunt tells me you've had a difficult year, Miss Gilmore," he said kindly. "Please know that our church community is here to support you in any way needed." "Thank you, Reverend," Nora replied. "Everyone has been very welcoming." "Including Mr. Edwards, I understand," the Reverend said with a twinkle in his eye. "It's not like Griff to accept dinner invitations. He usually claims the cattle need his attention." Nora felt her cheeks warm again. "He's been very kind since my arrival." "He's a good man," Reverend Johnston said more seriously. "Came here carrying burdens from the war, I think, but has built an honorable life. The kind of man who would give you the shirt off his back without a second thought." Before Nora could respond, Martha called everyone to the parlor for coffee. The evening concluded pleasantly with promises to meet again soon. When Griff took his leave, he paused near Nora. "The pie was excellent," he said quietly. "Worth riding 20 miles for." "Your ranch is hardly 20 miles away," Nora replied, smiling. "I'd ride twice that distance for such company," he said, his voice low enough that only she could hear. The weeks that followed settled into a pattern. Griff came to town each Saturday, always stopping at the millinery shop with some small offering fresh produce from his garden, a particularly interesting rock he'd found, or once, a wildflower pressed between pages of a book. Martha observed these visits with obvious approval, but maintained a discreet presence, often finding reasons to busy herself in the back room, leaving Nora and Griff to converse privately. Their conversations ranged widely from books they had both read to childhood memories, to hopes for the future. Nora found herself looking forward to Saturdays with increasing anticipation. The rest of the week merely prelude to those brief, precious moments with Griff. October arrived with cooler temperatures and preparations for winter. Martha began planning the shop's holiday displays, while ranchers like Griff worked to ensure their herds and homesteads were ready for the harsh Nevada winter. "I won't be in town next Saturday," Griff told Nora during his usual visit. "Need to move the herd to the lower pasture before the first frost." Nora tried to hide her disappointment. "Of course, the work must come first." "I was wondering," Griff said, seeming uncharacteristically hesitant, "if you might like to visit the ranch someday, when the weather's still good. To see how your rescue site looks in better circumstances." The invitation, innocent as it was, made Nora's heart race. "I'd like that very much. Perhaps this Sunday after church, if your aunt approves, of course." Martha not only approved but practically pushed Nora out the door that Sunday, insisting she take a basket of fresh muffins and preserves. No reason the poor man should have to cook after showing you around, she said with a wink. Griff arrived promptly after the service, driving a smart buggy rather than riding horseback. He helped Nora up with careful hands, the touch lingering slightly longer than necessary. The ride to the ranch took them past the site of their first meeting, now transformed by autumn colors. Hard to believe that broken wheel led to all this, Nora mused, gesturing to the landscape around them. Sometimes misfortune opens doors we wouldn't have found otherwise, Griff replied. I'm grateful for that broken wheel every day. The simple sincerity of his statement warmed Nora more than the sunshine that bathed the countryside. At the ranch, Griff proved an attentive host, showing Nora the improvements he'd made since purchasing the property, the expanded stable, the new well, the orchard he'd planted that had produced the apples for her pie. It's wonderful, Nora said honestly, admiring the way the small ranch nestled into the landscape. You've created something truly special here. It's missing something, Griff said quietly, looking at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. Inside, they shared the lunch Martha had packed, sitting at the same table where Nora had eaten venison stew on that rainy night. The room felt different in daylight, warmer, more inviting, filled with possibility. As they talked, something shifted between them. The careful formality of their town interactions gave way to a deeper connection. Griff spoke of his experiences during the war, not the battles, but the moments of humanity he'd witnessed amid the chaos. Nora shared her fears about starting over after losing her parents, the mingled grief and hope that had propelled her west. I was terrified that night, she admitted, not just of being stranded but of what lay ahead, a new town, new people, a future I couldn't imagine. And now? Griff asked, his eyes never leaving her face. Now I'm grateful for the journey, however difficult it was, Nora replied. It led me here. The word here hung between them, its meaning extending beyond the physical location. When it came time to return to town, Nora found herself reluctant to leave. At the buggy, Griff helped her up, but this time kept hold of her hand. Nora, he said, her name like a prayer on his lips. Would you permit me to court you properly, with your aunt's approval, of course? Joy bubbled up within her, unexpected and overwhelming. Yes, she answered simply. I would like that very much. The smile that spread across his face was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. Without warning, he leaned up and pressed a gentle kiss to her hand, the touch sending ripples of warmth through her entire body. I've wanted to do that since the moment I lifted you down from that wagon, he confessed. The ride back to town was filled with new awareness, each glance and casual touch charged with meaning. When they arrived at Martha's house, Griff formally requested permission to court Nora, a request Martha granted with obvious delight. It's about time, she declared. I was beginning to think you two would dance around each other until Christmas. Courtship in Carlin followed certain protocols, which Griff observed with respectful diligence. He called on Nora every Sunday after church and Wednesday evenings for dinner with Martha. His Saturday visits to the shop continued, but now included invitations to town socials and church functions. November brought the first snowfall and preparations for Thanksgiving. Martha planned an elaborate dinner, inviting not only Griff, but also the Parkers, Reverend Johnston and his wife, and several other prominent townspeople. The day before the celebration, Nora and Nancy decorated the dining room with dried autumn leaves and pine cones gathered from the hills around town. As they worked, Nancy broached a subject she had tactfully avoided until now. You and Mr. Edwards seem quite serious, she observed, adjusting a centerpiece. Mother says Martha is already planning the wedding. Nora blushed. We haven't discussed marriage yet. But you love him, Nancy stated rather than asked. The directness of the statement caught Nora off guard, but she couldn't deny its truth. "Yes," she admitted. "I do. And he loves you," Nancy continued, smiling. "Anyone with eyes can see that. The way he looks at you when he thinks no one is watching, like you're the answer to a question he's been asking his whole life." The poetic description brought tears to Nora's eyes. "I never expected to find this when I came west," she confessed. "I was just trying to survive after losing my parents." "The best things often come when we're looking elsewhere," Nancy replied wisely. "My mother always says that love finds us when we're ready for it, not when we're searching for it." Thanksgiving dinner was a joyous affair, the table groaning under the weight of roast turkey, ham, various vegetables, and 3 different pies. Griff sat beside Nora, occasionally brushing his hand against hers beneath the table, each touch a silent affirmation of their growing connection. After dinner, while the other guests conversed in the parlor, Griff invited Nora to step onto the porch for a moment of privacy. The night was cold but clear, stars scattered across the dark sky like diamonds on velvet. "I have something for you," Griff said, reaching into his pocket. He withdrew a small silver pendant on a delicate chain, a simple heart entwined with leaves. "It was my mother's. She gave it to me before she passed, said to give it to the woman who captured my heart." With gentle fingers, he fastened it around Nora's neck, the metal cool against her skin but quickly warming. "It's beautiful," she whispered, touching it reverently. "Nora," Griff began, taking both her hands in his, "these past months have been the happiest of my life. I know we haven't known each other long by some standards, but out here, life moves at its own pace." He dropped to one knee on the wooden porch, still holding her hands. "I love you. I think I started falling in love the moment I saw you standing beside that broken wagon, refusing to be defeated by circumstance. Would you do me the great honor of becoming my wife?" Tears sprang to Nora's eyes, her heart so full it felt it might burst. "Yes," she said through happy tears. "Yes, with all my heart." Griff rose and, with gentle deliberation, cupped her face in his hands. Their first kiss was tender, a promise of all that was to come. When they parted, Nora could see her own joy reflected in his eyes. "We should tell the others," she said, though reluctant to break the magic of the moment. Martha's reaction to the news was everything Nora expected: tears, embraces, and immediate discussion of wedding plans. "Spring would be lovely," she declared. "After the worst of winter, but before the summer heat." The engagement announcement was printed in the Carlin Chronicle the following week, prompting congratulations from throughout the community. Even Sarah Wilson from the boarding house offered good wishes, though Nancy whispered that she did so with a face like she'd bitten into a sour apple. December transformed Carlin with festive decorations and anticipation of Christmas celebrations. The millinery shop was busier than ever, as ladies ordered special bonnets for holiday gatherings. Nora worked long hours, missing Griff, but treasuring their planned time together even more. Heavy snow made travel difficult, but Griff still made it to town each Saturday, sometimes staying at the boarding house when the roads were too dangerous for the return journey. On Christmas Eve, he arrived with a small pine tree strapped to his saddle, insisting that Martha's home needed the traditional touch. They decorated it together, Martha, Nancy, and Nora, with hand-carved wooden ornaments Griff had made, and paper stars Nora had fashioned from pages of an old book beyond repair. The simple tree became a symbol of their blending lives, traditions from East and West combining to create something new and beautiful. Christmas Day brought more snow, but also warmth and laughter inside Martha's home. Gifts were exchanged, practical items mostly, with a few luxuries. Griff presented Nora with a leather-bound journal, the cover tooled with intricate flower patterns. "For your thoughts," he explained. "And perhaps someday, for our children to read and know their mother's heart." The mention of their children, made Nora's breath catch. The future stretched before them, filled with possibility. Nora's gift to Griff was a hand-knitted scarf in deep blue that matched his eyes, and a small daguerreotype of herself that she'd had taken in secret. "So you'll have me with you even when we're apart," she explained. That evening, as they sat before the fire, Martha tactfully retired early, leaving the engaged couple a rare moment of privacy. Griff drew Nora close, her head resting on his shoulder. "I've been thinking about the ranch," he said, his voice rumbling pleasantly against her ear. "The house is small, but we could add to it. Another bedroom or two, a larger kitchen." "It's perfect as it is," Nora assured him. "We can make changes as needed." "I want it to be a home you're proud of," Griff insisted. "Somewhere you'll be happy." Nora lifted her head to look at him directly. "Griff, I would be happy with you in a one-room cabin. It's not the house that matters, but the life we build within it." His kiss was answer enough, deeper than their previous embraces, filled with promise and longing. When they parted, both breathless, Griff pressed his forehead to hers. "3 more months," he murmured. "It seems an eternity." "It will pass quickly," Nora promised, though she felt the same impatience. January and February brought harsh weather and quiet days. The millinery shop saw few customers, allowing Nora time to prepare her trousseau and learn more about managing a ranch household from Martha, who had grown up on a farm in Pennsylvania. "Ranching is hard work," Martha warned. "Not like town life. You'll be more isolated, especially in winter." "I know," Nora acknowledged, "but Griff is worth it, and the ranch isn't so far that we can't visit often." Martha patted her hand affectionately. "You remind me of myself at your age, determined and in love. Richard and I had 40 good years together before he passed. I see that same potential in you and Griffin." As promised, March brought milder temperatures and renewed activity in Carlin. The wedding was set for the first Saturday in April, when spring flowers would be blooming and travel would be easier for the few distant relatives planning to attend. Nora's wedding dress was her most ambitious project, ivory satin with lace trim salvaged from her mother's wedding gown. Martha and Nancy helped with the detailed stitching, each woman adding her own special touch to the garment. Griff, meanwhile, was expanding the ranch house as promised. With help from neighboring ranchers, he added a larger bedroom and improved the kitchen, installing a new stove that had been shipped all the way from Chicago. The week before the wedding arrived with unexpected drama. A late-season storm hit the region, dropping nearly a foot of snow and making roads impassable. 3 days before the ceremony, there was still no word from Griff. "He'll make it," Martha assured a worried Nora. "That man would walk through fire to reach you." On the morning before the wedding, Nora stood at the shop window, watching the road anxiously. The snow had begun to melt, but the way to the ranch was still difficult at best. Reverend Johnston had already sent word that if Griff couldn't reach town, they might need to postpone the ceremony. Just as Nora was about to turn away, a figure appeared in the distance, a rider on horseback, pushing through the slushy snow with determination. Even at a distance, she recognized Griff's broad shoulders and the way he sat in the saddle. Without stopping for a coat, Nora rushed outside. Griff dismounted as she approached, his face breaking into a relieved smile at the sight of her. "I thought you might not make it," Nora said, throwing herself into his arms regardless of who might be watching. "Wild horses couldn't keep me away," Griff replied, holding her tightly. "Though I admit, there were moments I considered borrowing a pair to pull me through the drifts." That night, At the rehearsal dinner held in the church hall, Griff recounted his journey to the amusement of the assembled guests. "Had to leave the wagon behind and ride cross-country," he explained. Poor Thunderbolt earned an extra portion of oats for his efforts. As the evening wound down, Griff pulled Nora aside. "I have something to show you," he said mysteriously. "Can you meet me at dawn at the edge of town near the East Road, the morning of our wedding?" Nora asked, surprised. "Isn't that bad luck? Not where I come from," Griff assured her. "Trust me, always," Nora replied without hesitation. The next morning, Nora slipped out of the house before Martha or Nancy stirred. The air was crisp and clear, the rising sun painting the snow-covered landscape in shades of pink and gold. Griff waited at the appointed spot, holding the reins of 2 horses. "I thought we might take a short ride," he explained, helping her mount. "There's something I want you to see before we're surrounded by well-wishers." They rode east out of town, following a path Griff seemed to know well. After about 20 minutes, they crested a small hill and Griff drew his horse to a stop. "There," he said, pointing toward the valley below. Nora gasped at the sight. Nestled among the melting snow were thousands of tiny blue flowers, creating a carpet of color across the meadow. "Desert bluebells," Griff explained. "They're the first to bloom after winter, pushing right through the snow. My mother used to say they were a reminder that beauty can emerge from the harshest conditions." "They're wonderful," Nora breathed, enchanted by the unexpected display. "I wanted you to see them on our wedding day," Griff continued. "Because they remind me of you, determined, beautiful, thriving where others might falter." He dismounted and helped Nora down, then knelt to pick a small bunch of the delicate flowers. "For your bouquet," he said, presenting them to her. "Something blue." Nora accepted the flowers, touched beyond words by the gesture. Standing there in the early morning light, surrounded by blue blossoms and melting snow, she felt a certainty that transcended all doubt. "I love you, Griffin Edwards," she said simply. "And I love you, Nora Gilmore," he replied. "Today and always." They returned to town with just enough time for Nora to prepare for the ceremony. Martha fussed over her hair and dress, while Nancy carefully incorporated the bluebells into the bridal bouquet of white roses and greenery. The church was filled with friends and neighbors, the simple decorations transforming the modest building into a place of celebration. As Reverend Johnston began the service, Nora's eyes remained fixed on Griff, handsome in his new suit, his face radiating happiness. Their vows were traditional but spoken with deep personal meaning. When Griff placed the gold band on Nora's finger, his hands were steady, his voice clear and certain. The kiss that sealed their union was brief but profound, a public declaration of a private covenant. The reception at the town hall lasted well into the evening, with music, dancing, and enough food to feed half the county. As tradition dictated, Griff and Nora opened the dancing, moving together as if they'd been partners for years rather than months. "Mrs. Edwards," Griff whispered as they circled the floor. "How does it sound?" "Like the beginning of a wonderful story," Nora replied, her heart too full for more elaborate words. As the evening progressed, well-wishers offered congratulations and advice. Mr. Parker presented them with a substantial check to start your future right, while Martha gave them a handmade quilt she'd been secretly working on since their engagement. When the time came for their departure, rice showered down as they ran to the waiting buggy decorated with ribbons and tin cans. Martha embraced Nora one last time, whispering, "Be happy, my dear girl. You deserve every joy." The ride to the ranch was quiet, both of them wrapped in the significance of the day and the anticipation of the night ahead. When they arrived, Griff surprised Nora by lifting her into his arms to carry her across the threshold. "Welcome home, Mrs. Edwards," he said, setting her gently on her feet in the main room. The house had been transformed in her absence. Fresh flowers adorned every surface, and a fire crackled invitingly in the fireplace. On the table sat a bottle of champagne and 2 glasses, an unexpected luxury in the remote ranch house. "How did you manage all this?" Nora asked, amazed by the preparations. "I had help," Griff admitted with a smile. "Nancy rode out this morning with the flowers and champagne while we were at the meadow. Said it was her wedding gift to us." They toasted their marriage with the sparkling wine, the unfamiliar taste sweet on Nora's tongue. As the night deepened around them, the nervousness she had expected gave way to a serene certainty. This was right. This was where she belonged. Later, lying in Griff's arms in their new bedroom, Nora whispered, "Do you remember what you said when you first found me with the broken wagon?" "That you weren't alone," Griff recalled, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "I never will be again," Nora said softly. "Nor will you." The days that followed established patterns that would shape their life together. Mornings began early with ranch chores shared between them. Nora proved adept at managing the household and garden, while also learning to help with the cattle when needed. Their evenings were their own, sometimes spent reading aloud from Griff's growing collection of books, sometimes planning improvements to the ranch, often simply enjoying each other's company in contented silence. Spring gave way to summer, bringing longer days and increased work as the herd expanded and the garden flourished. They rode into Carlin every Sunday for church and dinner with Martha, maintaining the connection to town life that Nora valued. In late July, as they prepared for the Sunday trip to town, Nora felt an unusual fatigue. "Perhaps we should stay home today," she suggested, sitting down suddenly as a wave of dizziness passed over her. Concern immediately etched Griff's features. "Are you unwell?" "Just tired," Nora assured him, though the pattern of recent mornings had given her a suspicion about the cause. And perhaps something more. Understanding dawned in Griff's eyes. "Nora, are you?" She nodded, a smile spreading across her face despite her fatigue. "I think so." "It's early yet, but all the signs are there." Griff's response was to drop to his knees before her, placing his hands reverently on her still flat stomach. "A child," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "Our child." The town doctor confirmed Nora's suspicion the following week. "Due in February, by my calculation," he announced after his examination. "Everything appears normal and healthy, Mrs. Edwards." The news transformed their world yet again. The spare bedroom became the focus of preparations, with Griff crafting a cradle from pine wood, while Nora sewed tiny garments from soft flannel. Martha was ecstatic at the prospect of becoming a great aunt. "I always wanted a house full of children," she confessed to Nora. "But it wasn't in God's plan for Richard and me. Now I'll spoil yours instead." As Nora's body changed with the growing life inside her, Griff's attentiveness increased. He insisted on hiring a young ranch hand to help with the heavier work, freeing him to take on more household duties when Nora needed rest. "You don't need to coddle me," she protested after finding him scrubbing the kitchen floor one October morning. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time." "Not my wife, and not my child," Griff replied stubbornly. "Besides, I'm not entirely selfless. I want you both healthy and strong." The winter of 1877 arrived with heavy snow and bitter cold. The expanded ranch house proved its worth, staying warm and secure despite the harsh weather. Griff kept the pantry well stocked and made sure they had ample firewood, preparing for the possibility that they might be snowbound when Nora's time came. January passed slowly, each day bringing them closer to the baby's arrival. Nora's discomfort grew, but so did her excitement. In quiet moments, she often found Griff talking to her rounded belly, sharing stories about the ranch or reciting poetry from memory. "The child will be born knowing Tennyson by heart," she teased one evening. "Is that so terrible?" Griff asked with a smile. "Words have power. They brought us together after all." "How do you figure that?" Nora inquired, curious about his reasoning. "You're not alone," he quoted. "The first words I ever said to you. I saw something in your eyes when I said them, a recognition, as if you'd been waiting to hear exactly that." "I had been," Nora admitted softly. "Ever since my parents died, I'd felt completely alone, even surrounded by people. But something about the way you said those words, I believed you." Griff placed his hand on her stomach, feeling the baby move beneath his palm. "And now we're 3, soon to be more if I have any say in the matter." "Let's meet this one first," Nora laughed, covering his hand with her own. The baby arrived on a clear, cold February morning after a night of labor that tested Nora's endurance and Griff's composure. Martha had come to stay 2 weeks earlier, her experience proving invaluable during the birth. "A girl," Martha announced as the newborn's cries filled the room. "A beautiful, healthy girl." Griff, who had been banished to the kitchen during the final hours, burst into the bedroom at the sound. The sight of Nora, exhausted but radiant, holding their daughter wrapped in a white blanket, brought him to a standstill. "Come meet your daughter," Nora invited, her voice tired but joyful. With reverent steps, Griff approached the bed. Martha discreetly slipped from the room, giving the new family their first moments alone. The baby was tiny, with a dusting of dark hair and features that somehow combined both her parents. As Griff watched, she opened her eyes blue, like his own, and seemed to look directly at him. "She's perfect," he whispered, gently touching her cheek with one finger. "What shall we call her?" "I was thinking of Elizabeth," Nora suggested, "after my mother, Elizabeth Martha Edwards." "Elizabeth," Griff repeated, testing the name. "Eliza for short, perhaps." "Eliza," Nora agreed. "Our little Eliza." As if responding to her name, the baby made a small sound, her tiny hand escaping the blanket. Griff offered his finger and she grasped it with surprising strength. "She has your determination," he observed with a smile. "And your eyes," Nora replied. "God willing, she'll have your kindness too." In that moment, looking at his wife and daughter, Griff felt a completion he had never imagined possible. From the broken wheel that had brought Nora into his life to this perfect new beginning, every step had led here to this family, this love, this home. "Thank you," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "for this gift beyond measure." Nora reached for his hand, entwining their fingers as they had countless times before. "We created her together," she reminded him, "just as we'll create our future day by day." Outside, the February sun sparkled on the snow-covered landscape, promising the eventual return of spring. Inside, the small family huddled close, their love a warmth more enduring than any season. 5 years passed in the blink of an eye. The Edwards ranch prospered, expanding to include more cattle and better facilities. The house grew too, with another bedroom added when Nora became pregnant with their second child, a son they named James Griffin, after both their fathers. Eliza, now a spirited 5-year-old with her father's blue eyes and her mother's determined nature, took to the role of big sister with protective enthusiasm. 3-year-old James followed her everywhere, his admiration for his sister evident in every attempt to mimic her actions. On a warm June evening in 1882, the family sat on the front porch after dinner, watching the sunset paint the western sky in brilliant colors. Griff held baby Catherine, their newest addition at just 2 months old, while Nora supervised Eliza and James as they chased fireflies in the yard. "They're getting faster," Nora observed with a smile. "Soon they'll be outrunning us both." "Not for a few years yet," Griff replied, adjusting Catherine in his arms as she slept peacefully. "Though Eliza's already asking when she can have her own horse." "Like father, like daughter," Nora laughed. "She has your love of adventure." "And your heart," Griff added. "Yesterday I found her comforting that injured bird, telling it you're not alone, just like someone else I know." The phrase, which had defined the beginning of their relationship, had become something of a family motto over the years. Whenever one of the children was hurt or afraid, those words were offered along with comfort, a reminder of connection and love. As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Eliza ran to the porch, her face flushed with excitement. "Papa, will you tell us the wagon wheel story again?" It was a favorite bedtime request, the tale of how their parents had met, embellished over time but always centered on the broken wheel, the approaching storm, and the cowboy's promise of companionship. "It's nearly bedtime," Nora pointed out. "Perhaps tomorrow." "Please, Mama," James added his plea, his small hand tugging at her skirt. "I like the part where Papa rescues you." Griff and Nora exchanged amused glances over the children's heads. "One quick telling," Griff agreed, shifting Catherine to Nora's waiting arms. "Then straight to bed." The children settled on either side of him, their faces upturned in anticipation. Griff began the familiar story, his deep voice carrying across the quiet evening. "Once upon a time, as dusk settled over the Nevada desert, a brave young woman found herself stranded when her wagon wheel snapped on the lonely road to Carlin." Listening to the story she knew by heart, Nora gazed at her family, her husband, still handsome despite the lines that time had etched around his eyes, her children, healthy and happy, the home they had built together from love and determination. From the broken wheel that had seemed like disaster had grown all this abundance. As Griff reached the part where he lifted Nora from the wagon, James piped up, and then Papa said the magic words. "That's right," Griff confirmed, his eyes meeting Nora's across the porch. "I looked at your mama and said, 'You're not alone.' And you never were again," Eliza concluded with the satisfaction of a child who knows a story's proper ending. "No," Nora agreed, her heart full as she looked at the family surrounding her. "I never was again." And in the gathering twilight, with Catherine sleeping in her arms and the voices of her husband and older children blending in familiar harmony, Nora knew this truth with absolute certainty. From broken things could come the greatest blessings, and love, once found, could build a world.